Hello, my name is Xavier Von Erck. This is the 5th supplemental video for a little retrospective I'm putting together the years running pervertedjustice.com, which fellow olds might know as the website that created the show To Catch a Predator on Dateline NBC. Originally, I wasn't going to cover any of the Dateline episodes, given that so many accounts over the last 15 years have done so on YouTube already. However, as I had more databases brought online, there's some elements from the first 3 Datelines that I had completely forgotten about, and details that had never been released prior. Today we're heading to Strong Island, Bethpage, New York specifically, and taking a look at how the first Dateline episode, titled Dangerous Web, came to be. As always, if you're just wanting to watch the video of this thing itself, use the chapter links in the description to skip my various spiels. That's what they're there for. As I laid out in the last supplemental video covering various early media stings between January and March of 2004, the first Dateline NBC sting came in the middle of an extremely busy and tumultuous time. In February 2004 alone, we did 6 media sting pieces across the country in various areas with local TV stations. Immediately prior to the Dateline episode, we had just done the Newtown Square sting with NBC 10 in Philadelphia. This was causing all sorts of drama and issues for me to deal with at the time. After the Milwaukee sting in fall 2003, I knew well that this idea would lend itself greatly to a national hour-long broadcast. The first national entity to hit me up was, of all things, Al Roker's True Crime Production Company, that made shows for Court TV. Yeah, TV's favorite weatherman did true crime documentaries and stories. Trust me, I was just as surprised back then as you are today hearing that. So, in very early February 2004, I was talking with Al Roker Productions about doing a sting episode for Court TV, where we'd set up a house and send predators there to be interviewed by Big Al himself. His production company wanted to do it badly, but they had a big problem. Court TV's lawyers. First, Court TV's lawyers refused to allow them to do the sting and show faces. The faces would have to be blurred. I hated media blurring back then, but I really liked the idea and contrast of the types of guys we run across being interviewed by someone like Roker, who had a naturally affable personality. So, I gritted my teeth and said that I could work with that. Then, Court TV's lawyers came back again and said they wouldn't allow the sting if my website posted their unblurred faces and names. Sadly, that was a bridge too far, and the Roker production people went back to the drawing board because even they knew there was no way I could agree to that restriction. Eventually, they did a documentary called Katie.com, which turned out fine. Still, I must admit, despite knowing people will likely think I'm crazy, I would have loved Al Roker in that role. Chris Hansen did a fine job, but there was always the issue that this tall guy with his perfect voice almost came off like a bully sometimes if you don't read the chat logs. It was an enduring criticism of the Dateline stings, as the average dullard male who was picked on by a Hansen type in high school often had such a knee-jerk illogical reaction. Fact is, most American males at the time, and even today, looked more like the cross-section of internet predators that showed to the sting house, whereas few looked like Hansen. That's not a shot at any fellow potentially listening to this. I'm a schlub too. I get it. And, as a guy that sounds like a sarcastic, smarmy fellow myself, I know how people react to me. Quite negatively. And many people reacted to Hansen's work in much the same way, even though his cadence was far less smarmy and arrogant than mine is. My mom, as an example, hated him in the role for that reason. She thought a Carrie Tomlinson type from KPTV would have worked better. She might have been right. To me, Roker would have had the advantage of being a beloved TV staple for decades. The man was on an episode of Seinfeld as himself, a fixture on the most popular TV morning show of all time, and generally had a warm likability. Having him in the confronting role would have been, in my opinion, perfect. Not only would it have blunted the, "oh, they're being mean" criticism of the show, but imagine one of the types of guys we sent to these houses walking in and seeing Roker. Would have been a totally bizarre situation for them, and I think even more of them would have been so confused that there would have been far fewer guys immediately running away. But alas, it was not meant to be, because of stupid court TV. On February 5th, 2004, our stings with WDIV in Detroit and KCTV in Kansas City blew up big. KCTV in Kansas City especially, as it made national news. This prompted a deluge of media requests, both from local TV stations and from national productions. In the span of just a few days, I had contact from each of the big three national network entities wanting to do what we had done in Detroit and Kansas City for a national outlet. Yeah, all three in the same few days emailed me. From ABC, Primetime Live emailed wanting to do a media sting. For anyone who has watched and listened to my supplementals, you already know why that was a big, fat, fucking nope. We had caught an ABC News national producer in our Milwaukee sting, and ABC News did not fire him. In fact, many ABC News producers, when contacted about one of their coworkers being caught in a sting, shit on our volunteers for contacting. They even took their forum and set up filters to try to stop my people from making posts about it. So, fuck ABC News, even if the Primetime Live producers had nothing to do with it. I was never going to work with ABC National News on anything after our experience dealing with their corporate culture prior. From CBS, 60 Minutes. 2. Aw, man. 2? Come on. Even today, I'm disgusted. Had producers from 60 Minutes wanted to do a sting with 60 Minutes would have been done. I loved 60 Minutes. It's iconic. Would have jumped the chance. But 60 Minutes too? Now, call me an arrogant asshole. Hell, I know what I am. I'm not offended by it. But no chance. 60 Minutes too was one of the worst branding ideas possible. Talk about making a show seem second-rate just by the title alone. Should have been 60 Minutes Friday and 60 Minutes whatever else day. So that was a nope as well. And from NBC, as you already well know, Dateline NBC. Had some reservations here as well, as that little stunt they pulled in the 1990s with the exploding truck was not something I was a fan of back in the day. But compared to the absolute no-go that ABC News was, Court TV's lawyers being ridiculous, and CBS only offering the lesser of the two 60-minute properties. At least Dateline NBC didn't have a negative history of us, and it was the flagship NBC Media News magazine, not a second-rate one. As covered in previous supplemental videos, I would farm out sting requests to individuals to be the lead on, trying to find a mix of competence and a lack of fear regarding being unblurred on television. Evaluating those who had done the work coordinating with media thus far, there was no doubt that I was putting Frag on this sting as lead. He was the most thorough and organized of the people I had entrusted being the point person on media stings in the past. It was a no-brainer. Now, I'm not going to be some dickhead that pretends he hasn't seen people talk shit about him. I most certainly have. I enjoy reading comments, even if they're almost always completely fucking moronic. One of the things I've seen said way too many times is, "Oh, why wasn't Xavier on those Dateline shows? Oh, I know. It's because Dateline thought he was a creepy asshole." Fact is, I was looking from day one to fill a spokesperson type role for positive media. I've covered that in previous supplementals. I could have been a complete asshole and had media properties fly me around the country to do interview after interview. But my hope was that someone would come along with either a commanding older male presence or a younger, attractive female presence without being in shadow to handle communicating our message in the easier media interviews. And then I'd handle the times when people were trying to throw at our heads, absorbing the media bullets. Good media spokespeople, bad media spokesperson, basically. Could I have just said, yeah, I'll go be at the house and be on national TV had I wanted to? Absolutely. I had both the first and the final call on everything after I had dealt with Frank Finspost, as shown in the last supplemental. But it would have made 0 sense to go be at that house on a few levels. 1. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool misanthrope since I was like fucking 12. Last thing I wanted was dealing with people approaching me in public. I hung out with Dell in person a couple times years later, and the amount of people that would run up to her, clamoring about TCAP, was fucking freaky. Fuck that. 2. I sound sarcastic and or smarmy when just ordering food. 3. My schedule was insane. I was fucking busy, brother. Here's a good example. Back in early March 2004, a couple days prior to the first Dateline Sting House opening, I wrote an entry on my personal blog website detailing my schedule that prior week. It's on screen now. My schedule wouldn't have allowed it even if I had wanted to go out and be the guy in the house. I was busy handling the fallout from the Newtown Square, Pennsylvania sting, with the Fancy Dan suburb being up in arms, NIMBY style, about the news station there using a house in their community. Plus, the Rob Feinstein element from the sting was keeping me extremely busy as well. Hell, on March 9th, in the middle of the Dateline sting, I end up doing a debate piece on friggin' CNN. All while working a very boring tech support job for a piece of software called TaxCut by H&R Block to pay both my bills and the bills of the website itself. Fortunately, I mostly did email tech support for TaxCut, so I'd spend half my time at work doing that, and half my time at work overseeing and doing work on perverted justice instead. Sometimes I'd be working on 2 emails at once, one for the job I was being paid for, and one for the job I actually cared about. Main problem was my transit time from my shitty apartment to my shitty job was around 2 hours long on light rail across literally the entire city each way. So yeah, 4 hours on the Max line in 2004, nearly daily, pre-smartphones. Can still hear Portis, Amadercha in my head, waking me up at every stop as I desperately tried to get more sleep. Old school Portlanders? No. As we trek down the years and more Dateline stings are covered, it turns out to be the best decision possible to have sent Frag and Dell to do these things. Not merely because they were great at it, not simply for the sake of my mental health, but also our effectiveness at pushing back against Dateline making unreasonable demands. Being able to be Dr. No behind the internet curtain was a great boon for us later on. Frag and Dell could be the good cop in the house, and whenever a bad cop was needed to deal with Dateline, it was Xavier says from outside the house. That's a teaser for Dateline 3 in Riverside. Oh, is it ever a teaser for Dateline 3 in Riverside? Back on track, we get the date for the first Dateline house on February 24th, 2004. Screenshot on screen now. Yup, that's the first time most of us had heard of Chris Hansen. Many people seem to think Hansen set up the work with us, but it was a producer named Lynn Keller that did so. She was who we worked with, as Chris was an on-air talent, not a guy that set things up with us. Frag starts to poll the contributors, asking who is in. I put it pretty simply. That's how Frag was selected by me as head of the Dateline NBC coordination. You might be asking, what about Del Harvey? Well, Del was brought on as a chat contributor 8 days after we had already announced that we were doing the Dateline Sting, bringing her fully on board as a contributor on February 19th, 2004. She had impressed the fuck out of me with her work doing follow-up on posted individuals. Her general intelligence when posting shone through. Could tell she had a ridiculous amount of talent for being organized, was logical, and a serious level of drive. A few days before the house was scheduled to open, Lynn Keller from Dateline hadn't realized that we did phone verification with younger sounding folks, and requested that we bring a verifier to the house. Frag and I chose Dell. She was able to get there on short notice, which was important, but we both knew she was the best choice as well. She was small and young enough to pass for a younger kid, had a voice that could do both male and female verification calls, and was well spoken. After a long search of frustration, trying out contributors with media pieces, I had a good inkling that Dell could very easily be the person I was long looking for to represent the organization on easier, positive media pieces. Given that she was brought on as a contributor a mere 2 weeks prior, our choosing her caused no shortage of issues with some other people being jealous and backbiting the decision, one of whom would be so embittered by it that she would throw drama fits and leave within a couple months, her attitude never being the same after being passed over for Dell. With the house acquired, Frag and Dell being set up to be our coordinators inside the house, myself whipping the contributors to work the rooms, everything was in place. We had 3 whole days to actually work the rooms before the house opened on a fucking Monday. Yeah, the first thing with Dateline was a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday sting. It would turn out to basically just be the Monday and Tuesday, as we had more than enough arrive on Monday and Tuesday that Dateline mostly canceled the Wednesday slots. 16 guys showing over mostly 2 days, despite our only having a few days run-up to work the rooms, and about half the manpower we would have even just a year and a half later for the second Dateline Sting. Anyways, all that argle-bargle out of the way, here's the show, slightly upscaled and de-artifacted from its original glorious 240p.
It's a Dateline hidden camera investigation no parent will want to miss.
Come in.
This man could be your neighbor. He thinks he's at this house to have sex with a 14-year-old girl.
Sit at the counter. I gotta finish getting dressed.
He met her just hours ago in an internet chat room, the kind your kids may visit every day. But he wasn't really chatting with a minor.
All right, I'm about to be Mandy.
These adult volunteers pose online as kids to catch internet predators.
Mandy, and how old are you?
Mandy is 13.
All these men were trolling the internet, looking for kids, having explicit conversations, and then making arrangements to meet.
Wants to take me to an available buddy's house, and...
But when they arrived for their date, the young teens weren't there. Dateline was.
Correspondent for NBC News.
Can't put me on TV.
Oh, yes, we can. You'll be shocked by who showed up, almost as shocked as they were when Dateline dropped in.
Am I going to jail?
Chris Hansen with a Dateline hidden camera investigation. Dateline with Stone Phillips will continue after this brief message. And now, Dangerous Web. Here is Stone Phillips.
Good evening. Don't talk to strangers. It's a basic rule of safety every parent tells their child. But if there's a computer in your home, it's possible that your children have been talking to strangers. Tonight we're going to show you just how dangerous it can be to let your child surf the web alone, and how quickly a stranger, maybe a sexual predator, can go from chatting with your teen in cyberspace to knocking on your front door. How easily can it happen? We found out in a Dateline hidden camera investigation. We want to warn you, some of what you're about to see and hear tonight is graphic and explicit. Here's Chris Hansen.
This is a house on an average street in an average town. It could be your town, but there's something very different about this place.
The back doors are locked.
A major crime against a child is possibly being committed here. A crime that happens more often than you'd ever imagine. This grown man is here after making a date for sex with a 14-year-old girl he met only hours earlier on the internet.
Just come on in, I'm finishing getting ready, okay?
Tonight, a Dateline hidden camera investigation exposes a very real threat to your children. Online sexual predators. You'll see firsthand how they find victims and seduce them. And you'll be watching as they take the next step and show up at a home where they think a minor is alone. The problem, as you'll see in our investigation, is epidemic. Just ask a group of middle school kids.
Has anyone here been approached by a stranger in a chat room?
These kids, ranging in age from 11 to 14, say it happens all the time.
It's just disgusting stuff that they send to me just to try to get me into looking at disgusting websites.
And many parents aren't as computer savvy as their children, making it tougher to protect kids from internet predators.
The combination of their social naivete and our computer naivete is a dangerous combination.
1 in 5 children online in this country has been approached by adults looking for sex, according to a study funded by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. That large number doesn't surprise former FBI profiler and leading child sex crimes expert Ken Lanning.
There seems to be a bottomless barrel of cases. You go out there, and no matter what you do, there just seems to be more and more of these individuals.
Internet predators are very good at convincing you that they're your friend.
Shelley Riling of Danbury, Connecticut, had no idea about the danger lurking online for her 13-year-old niece, Chrissy, an honor student, altar girl, and co-captain of her cheerleading team. In May 2002, Chrissy told her aunt she was going to the mall to meet a friend. Instead, she met up with a stranger she'd met online, a 24-year-old married man named Saul Dos Reis. Prosecutors charge he took her for a ride in his car, sexually abused her, and then strangled her. Dos Reis was convicted of first-degree manslaughter.
When I opened up the door and I saw the minister, I knew. And I looked for Chrissy, and she wasn't there, and I knew they were going to tell me that she had been killed.
How do sexual predators find children like Chrissy on the internet? By going to a chat room like this one, scanning the profiles looking for a victim. Then they'll instant message that child. Very often they'll get a message back. Usually the chats start off friendly. Later they'll get sexual. And finally the predator will try to convince a child to meet in person.
Teenagers are rebellious. Teenagers are curious. Teenagers can have a strong interest in sex and all these characteristics. And so what many of these offenders are taking advantage of are these characteristics of teenagers.
Laws differ from state to state, but generally it's against the law to use the internet to entice a minor to engage in sexual activity. It's also illegal to transmit obscene matter to a person under 16.
The fact that you use something like a computer and the internet and that technology crosses state lines, that can also make it a federal violation.
Law enforcement agencies like the FBI and U.S. Customs have made catching internet predators a high priority, but they say the problem is just too big. Enter a group called Perverted Justice, a kind of online vigilante organization whose mission is to do what it believes law enforcement doesn't always have the resources to do, make a full-time job of going after internet predators. And they do it by posing as kids online.
This is what a 13-year-old girl looks like at Perverted Justice.
At any given moment, one of Perverted Justice's 25 volunteers, some who say they were victims themselves of sexual abuse, troll internet chat rooms, usually through AOL and Yahoo, waiting to be approached by a predator.
Are these chat rooms really that creepy?
Oh, they're just loaded. Yeah. I mean, you know, half the times we have to close down some of the windows. There's so many guys hitting on us that'll crash our machines.
While Perverted Justice has no authority to arrest the potential predators it identifies, it sometimes aids in the criminal prosecution of those men. But many in law enforcement strongly oppose any civilian group conducting sting operations. Nevertheless, Perverted Justice exposes these individuals by posting their picture phone number, and a copy of their sexual chat on its website. As a result, the men's family, neighbors, and employers are often notified by website visitors.
Why is this not entrapment?
Well, it's not entrapment. First of all, we're not a legal entity. Secondly, we're sitting in a chat room. We're not starting anything. They're having a conversation with us of their own free will.
Then, perverted justice volunteers will often engage in sexually explicit chats, coming on to a would-be predator to see if he'll take the bait.
If you don't trust me, that's cool.
It's one thing to chat online. The danger is far greater when it becomes person to person. So how many of these internet stalkers would actually make a date and show up to have sex with a teen? In other words, commit statutory rape. We decided to find out. More than a few sexual predators believe there's a minor waiting alone in this house, but they're in for a big surprise. We've got our hidden cameras rolling, so stick around and wait to see who knocks on our door.
What sort of man shows up for a date with a 14-year-old girl?
Just set the couch so I'll finish getting ready, okay?
And what will happen when we confront him?
Do you have children? Yes, I do.
When our Dateline hidden camera investigation, Dangerous Web, continues. We now continue with Dangerous Web.
It looks like we got another one.
To follow the trail of an internet predator prowling for children, from seduction in a chat room to a face-to-face meeting, you need three things: a realistic setting, someone proficient in the teen speak of the internet, and a way to record it all.
This is real time.
This is real time. This is happening right now.
Save as.
We rented this house in a middle-class neighborhood on a main street far from any school. Our technicians rigged the house with hidden cameras inside and out.
I bet that's him.
And we enlisted the help of volunteers from Perverted Justice, who make it their mission to expose some of the estimated 50,000 predators nationwide said to be trolling the internet at any given time. Volunteers like 21-year-old Dell.
Protecting little children from people who would destroy their lives. It's just such a worthy cause.
Dell and other volunteers like 38-year-old Frag, or using their undercover names, go online, posing as 12, 13, or 14-year-olds, using a picture that is unmistakably underage. Some volunteers pretend to be girls and some boys. Either way, they never make the first contact. Instead, they wait to be seduced.
Now, how explicit do you have to be to lure these guys in?
Well, we don't really have to lure them. They'll come to us. We go into these chat rooms. I haven't said a word to anybody. I'm sitting in the room, and the IMs start popping up, and they start coming on.
Sure enough, in a matter of minutes, the online chat becomes sexually explicit. This man, screen name Ed in NYC, thinking he's talking to a 13-year-old, says, "You feeling horny right now?" Another, Me for Magic NY, asks, "Are you a virgin?" The girl says, "Yeah." And then this 33-year-old proceeds to turn on his webcam, expose himself, then masturbate in front of a girl he believes is 13. Right then and there, this man may have committed a federal crime by using the internet to transmit obscene matter to a person he believed to be underage. Other predators send pictures of themselves, then give their phone number, hoping for a call.
Hey, is this John? Hey, it's Mandy.
Dell, now posing as a 13-year-old girl, does exactly that. She tells the predator her parents aren't home and that it'd be okay for him to come to her house.
I was just making sure you were for real because I wanted to know you really wanted this.
There would be dozens of sexually graphic online chats intended for children. Chats so disgusting we can't even begin to show you. There would also be picture exchanges and phone calls. But how many of these men would be willing to make a date and then be bold enough to walk in the door? We didn't have to wait long to find out, and we caught it all on our hidden cameras. Meet 35-year-old Steve, known on the internet as SR8219. He's a married man with children.
Just come on in and sit at the counter. I gotta finish getting dressed.
Dell, posing as a 14-year-old, invites him in. And even though there really isn't a 14-year-old in the house, this man still may be committing a crime, according to sex crimes expert Ken Lanning.
The federal law makes it pretty clear there doesn't have to be an actual child there.
And as far as Steve is concerned, there's a real 14-year-old in this house.
Just sit at the counter. I'll be right down, okay?
As for why he's here, after we read you part of his online chat, it will be pretty clear.
You on the pill?
No, you wear condoms?
If you want me to, but I'm sterile.
Okay, then you don't have to wear a condom if you don't want to.
But before we have sex, I want you to make me.
He then assaults the girl with chat about oral and anal sex and even asks a series of deeply personal questions like, when do you get your period? And another offensive question about her personal hygiene. Law enforcement has a name for this kind of guy, a potentially dangerous predator who goes from a chat room to a real-life meeting intent on an encounter with a child. They're called travelers.
He starts to communicate online, and then he is going to travel to where the child is, or he's going to try to get the child to travel to where he is, also they can engage in actual sexual activity with the child.
But today, Steve won't have a chance for sex with a 14-year-old. Instead, he'll be meeting me. He seems to think I'm a police officer. I haven't told him yet I'm a television reporter, and at this point, he has no idea he's being videotaped.
I knew.
You knew what?
Exactly what was going on.
Just take your hands out of your pockets for me. No, you don't have to put them up.
No problem. I knew what was going on. I'm not stupid.
It's pretty clear that Steve thinks he was caught up in a police sting. He says he was just coming over to check it out.
So you were obviously suspicious in the beginning.
Of course I am. I'm always suspicious.
Always? Do you do this a lot?
No, this is the first time I've actually did show up to see what was going on.
And you expect me to believe that?
Yes, I do.
Do you have children?
Yes, I do.
And how would you feel if one of your children was 13 or 14 years old, that child was home alone, chatting with somebody on the internet who ultimately came over with no parent at home? How would you feel about that as a parent?
I'd be pretty pissed off.
Right. You'll hear more from Steve later. Right now, there's another man walking down our driveway. He's the one who turned on his webcam to put on a little sex show. Now he's in our kitchen. He's 33-year-old Musti, Me for Magic, New York, and he's expecting to hook up with a 13-year-old virgin.
Just sit down at the counter for a minute and I'll be down in a second.
Just hours earlier, after exposing himself online, he tells the girl he wants oral sex before he takes her virginity. And if that's not disgusting enough, he continues to titillate himself by asking intimate questions, like the size of her breasts, and other questions too disturbing for us to mention.
So you talk this way to all your friends on the internet?
Yes.
About all these sex acts and in this
yes,
graphic way?
And everybody talking like that, and they have a web site over there too.
So this is just a game to you?
Yes, it's a just game.
But is it a game when you send an obscene video?
Now it sounds like you exposed yourself on a webcam.
But I'm telling you...
Did you or did you not?
I have a webcam too, and the other people have a webcam too, and we're playing.
You're playing?
We see each other and we're playing.
Yeah, what game were you playing on the webcam?
It's up to you, I don't know.
Our undercover operation has only been up and running for 2 hours, and already 2 men who chatted graphically about sex online and then made a date have come into the house looking for a young girl home alone. Watch our hidden cameras. You're about to see a lot more. This 30-year-old man, screen name Dark Hero, showed up expecting a date with a 13-year-old girl. It turns out he has a history of mental illness with possible suicidal tendencies. So we've disguised his identity but included him in our report to illustrate how there's no telling what kind of unstable character might show up for a meeting with a minor. Listen as we read a little of what he said online to her just hours earlier.
I want to be your master so badly.
I've only been with one guy.
That's okay. I'll tell you exactly what to do. You'll be fine. Are you going to pose nude for me, sweetheart?
Maybe if you're really good.
Just sit down at the counter. I want to finish getting dressed, okay?
Sit down where?
At the counter.
Okay, where the light is?
Yeah.
Okay.
But instead of meeting his fantasy girl, I walk in.
You thought it was a good idea to come visit a 13-year-old girl for what reason?
Just to hang out. Just a lonely guy, you know? I don't mean anybody any harm.
Have you ever done this before?
No.
You'll hear much more from Dark Hero later. So what kind of man seduces a minor and then shows up in person? Former FBI profiler Lanning says it's a man who can't control himself.
Once these fantasies become fueled by the discussions with the child, then in a sense the hook is in. This individual then is committed to this and then is drawn to trying to turn these fantasies that they've spent so much time into a reality.
Our little house in the suburbs has become the destination for a parade of potential predators. In the first 8 hours of our investigation, 8 men show up, one after the other, from early afternoon into the evening, none of them realizing their every move is being recorded. Each man made a date on the internet and believes a minor is home alone and open to the idea of sex. Remember this man, screen name Ed in NYC? He's 34-year-old Eddie, and when he shows up at the house, he tries something none of the others did. Before he'll come into the kitchen, he comes up with a scheme to insulate himself from possible criminal charges, and he tries to get the girl to play along.
Okay, listen, just say something to me.
What do you want me to say?
I say, Rachel, you're 19 years old, right?
I'm not, though. You know I'm not.
I don't know that.
I told you I was 14. You saw it, you said it back to me. What are you talking about?
No. Not as far as I know. As far as I know, you're 19 years old, right?
But
Rachel, can you read between the lines?
When I walk in, Eddie admits he was trying not to incriminate himself.
My intentions are not anything, so I just want to protect myself, that's all.
But she told you on the internet she was 14.
19, she wrote on the internet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what
On the internet?
Yes.
You want to stick with that story?
That's what I thought she wrote.
You want to see the transcript?
I'm sure you have it.
The fact that Eddie is so cunning doesn't surprise law enforcement experts.
Not only are they not stupid, but they're probably above average intelligent. They can be a wide variety of individuals, but a lot of them are well-educated individuals.
We'll get back to Eddie later. There are more men on the way. The second day of our investigation turns out to be just as busy as the first. 8 hours, 8 men. Some come looking not for girls, but for boys. This is 35-year-old Craig, screen name 34 going on 17. He's here to meet a 14-year-old boy.
Am I going to jail?
You're not going to jail.
I know, it was, as you can tell, it wasn't something I really, I was just going to hang out. I really wasn't going to do anything, to be honest with you. We talked, I know I said things on there, but I've never done anything like that, and I was just bored.
He sure didn't seem bored earlier online when he tried to coax a teenager into the shower.
No, shower with me. I stink, I gotta shower, me too, so let's shower together.
I know what I said.
Help me understand, though. I mean, if you're the parent of a kid...
It's completely wrong. I know it is. Even just to even talk like that. I know, believe me, I know that this was stupid.
So many men start showing up for the dates they made online, a kind of traffic jam develops. This guy heads to the back door, looks inside, sees another man is already there, and decides to make a run for it. But 20-year-old Esteban, known online as Skatey Pie, walks right into the kitchen and waits, although not for long. I asked him about his online chat with who he thought was a young girl.
Why don't you tell me exactly what you talked about?
About sex.
About sex?
Yeah.
We cut short our interview because while we were talking to Esteban, yet another man is at our door. We asked Esteban to wait in the basement.
Come with me for a second.
In 2.5 days, 18 men walked down this driveway thinking they were going to meet a 12, 13, or 14-year-old home alone. All of them chatted online, often talking graphically about sex, spoke on the phone with a decoy, sent a photo, and made a date to meet at the house. But almost all the men said they weren't really here to have sex, and most shared yet another explanation.
I've never done anything like that.
How many times have you done this?
Never before in my whole life.
Do you do this often?
No.
How often do you do this sort of thing?
No, not very often at all.
Have you ever done this before?
No.
Do you do this often?
Never. I've never done this, and never will I do it again. I don't know what even came over me to come do this.
But perhaps the most creative excuses came from 23-year-old Mike, known online as MUXACB 2003. He traveled from another state to meet a 14-year-old. At first, Mike says he's at the wrong address.
This isn't 554?
Yeah, no, this is not 554.
Then he says someone was impersonating him online.
I have no idea what this is.
Either way, he says it's all a big mix-up.
Explain to me exactly how you ended up here. I mean, you just walked up the sidewalk and walked into this house because what? You thought it looked like a nice house? Yeah. Do you understand why that story doesn't make sense?
After a few minutes, Mike decides to come clean.
Because I wasn't thinking.
You weren't thinking?
No.
So all that stuff you told me earlier is a lie?
Yes.
You want to tell me the truth now?
Yes.
What happened?
He admits he came here hoping for sex with a 14-year-old.
Did you bring condoms today? You did?
Yeah.
So what does that say about your intent?
It was wrong. It was stupid. I was immature.
Remember, so far, these men don't realize they're being videotaped, much less that they'll turn up on Dateline.
I am a correspondent for Dateline NBC.
But they're about to find out.
You can't put me on TV.
Yes, we can. This guy, too. He's a New York City fireman, also caught on the web.
The reality is this. You had a conversation with somebody who said they were 14 years old. It was a very explicit conversation. You got in your car and you drove by the house where she said she was home alone with no parents.
Right. When our Dateline hidden camera investigation, Dangerous Web, continues. We now return to Dangerous Web. Here again is Stone Phillips.
Returning to our story, you've seen how 18 men, after trolling through chat rooms looking for young teenagers, showed up for what they thought was going to be a date with a minor. They're about to find out their date is with Dateline. A reminder, some of what you're about to see and hear is graphic and explicit. Here again, Chris Hansen.
Just come in and sit at the counter.
In 2.5 days, most of these men likely broke state and federal laws by coming to this house to sexually violate a 12, 13, or 14-year-old.
What's going on? Nothing much. Yeah.
Some talked probably because they thought I was with law enforcement, although I never pretended to be a cop.
Well, you want to tell me why you really came over?
I really wanted to just take him to the movies. In fact,
but none had any idea our hidden cameras were going to expose them before a national audience. When we told them, most headed for the door, like Steve, the married man with children.
I'm Chris Hansen of Dateline NBC, and we're doing a story on grown-ups.
Okay.
On the internet.
Go ahead. I am leaving.
All right,
because,
go ahead.
You know, and you don't have my permission to put me on tape either.
I'm Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC, and we're doing a story.
You can't put me on TV.
But some wanted a chance to try to explain themselves. Remember 34-year-old Eddie? He was the one who thought he'd found a way to cover himself legally.
As far as I know, you're 19 years old, right?
When I confront him, he's ready with a story. He says he's a TV producer doing research.
Where are you a television producer?
I work independently right now.
Yeah. You know, it's ironic because I work in television too, with Dateline NBC.
Okay.
At first, this television producer appears a bit camera shy, but then he decides to open up.
I haven't done anything wrong at all. If you go into the transcripts, time and time again, everything that was said.
Picture this.
Everything.
Picture this. You lying back, eyes straddle your chest. It sounds like you were looking to have a sexual experience with this girl, Rachel, who we were talking to on the internet. I mean, I don't know what other conclusion you can draw.
You can search me for a condom. I don't have one on me. I wouldn't have sex without one.
Eddie thinks he's pretty smooth, and he's not quite finished. He's got yet another excuse why he's not really here for sex.
Besides, she's supposedly a virgin, so she's never had sex anyway, so I certainly wouldn't want to be the first.
Kind of sounds like you might have been excited about the fact that she was a virgin in here.
No, I don't think so. You don't see that in there. And in fact, all you see is just little test scenarios.
For the record, it appears Eddie has worked as a TV producer.
I'm very interested in your story. I think it's a great thing that you're doing. I think it's something that you should certainly do more and more, and bad people left and right.
Thanks for the pat on the back, Eddie. Meanwhile, when it comes to excuses, law enforcement experts say they've heard them all.
It's not uncommon for these individuals, when caught dead to right, to try to minimize and downplay and to rationalize and justify and offer these excuses.
But when 30-year-old Dark Hero learns he was going to be part of our report, he tries a different approach. Remember, we've disguised him because of his history of mental illness and possible suicidal tendencies.
I'm ashamed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean anybody any harm.
Then he reveals something that, after investigation, appears to be true.
I'm a schizophrenic man. I'm supposed to see my doctor today.
All right, perhaps you should go see him.
I'm just getting my life in order. You're going to ruin my life.
You're the one who made the decision to come here.
But I didn't know I was going to wind up on television.
What would you have done with a 13-year-old girl?
I probably just would have said hello and how you doing, and maybe we would have taken a ride in the car, and that's it.
You were going to take her for a ride in the car?
Maybe. I just got out of a mental institution a few months ago. I'm just a guy looking for a girlfriend. That's it. You're going to take a guy who's looking for a girlfriend and put him on TV and say, oh, here's a pedophile. That's what you're going to do, right? Because I came to meet a 13-year-old, even though I didn't do anything. I think that's ridiculous. I think your story is a piece of shit.
It turns out Dark Hero has a long history of mental illness, and he has a history with law enforcement. In fact, his former girlfriend was granted an order of protection against him, an order which he violated. He later pleaded guilty to second-degree harassment and criminal contempt. Yet here he is, able to chat online, make a date, and show up for a possible sexual encounter with a 13-year-old. While virtually every man who made a date to commit statutory rape showed up at our house, there was another who never made it in the door, although he came awfully close. He's a man in a position of trust. 24-year-old Ryan Hogan, screen name Ryan4686, a New York City firefighter.
Want to call me? He wants to talk.
After spending hours engaged in an obscene chat, sometimes from the firehouse, he makes a plan to come over to have sex with our 14-year-old. But as he drives by the house, he phones. He's having second thoughts and cancels, telling our decoy she's too young.
He went back to saying there was immoral and illegal and everything else.
But the real reason may have been something else entirely. He goes home, gets back online, and says he saw this, a police car coincidentally parked next door to our house. But even that doesn't stop him. He gets comfortable again, turns on his webcam, exposes himself, and masturbates, all while wearing his New York City firefighter sweatshirt.
Yeah, it's obscene. It's obscene.
And then, unbelievably, he says he's going to come by the house again. He never makes it, so we go looking for him.
Hey, Ryan. Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC. And we're doing a story about adults in chat rooms on the internet.
At first, firefighter Ryan says he thought the girl was 19. Then he decides to come clean.
The reality is this. You had a conversation with somebody who said they were 14 years old. It was a very explicit sexual conversation. You got in your car and you drove by the house where she said she was home alone with no parents.
Right.
That's all true, right?
Yes. But did I stop? No. Did I, in the end, make the right decision as what not to do? Yes, I did.
You said that you had every intent of showing up at this house, except that you saw a marked police car parked next door.
I had driven, before I saw the marked police car, I made the decision not to stop. I really did.
But what about his lewd performance on the webcam in front of someone he thought was 14?
And then afterwards, you turned on the webcam and transmitted this picture.
That was not supposed to be transmitted.
Of yourself exposing yourself.
That was not transmitted. For the record, I was talking to another person at the time. I did not intend for her to see that.
You didn't intend for her to see this?
No, sir, I did not. Somebody else was viewing that at the time.
But if you look at the firefighter's chat log, he asks our decoy first if she sees the picture, and then if she liked it.
Is this appropriate behavior for a New York City firefighter?
No, sir, it is not.
For any adult to have this kind of conversation with somebody who says they're a 14-year-old girl home alone?
No, sir, it is not.
Then what are you doing, Ryan?
I made a mistake at the time. I made the judgment call to correct that mistake.
Is there anything else you want to say about this?
Yeah, I think people got to use their heads. People should know better. I made a mistake.
So what happens now to all these men who were so clearly caught in the act? To start, all of them were exposed by Perverted Justice, the online watchdog group. All the men's photos, phone numbers, and chat logs were posted on its website. The firefighter was arrested and charged with using the internet to attempt to solicit a minor for sex and attempting to transmit obscene matter to a person under the age of 16. Hogan has pled not guilty. This man, who told us he was schizophrenic, was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. So how would you react if 18 strangers showed up in your neighborhood in just 2 days? Probably a lot like these parents.
Mr. Risa, you're 19 years old, right?
Almost too angry for words.
19 years old? I want you to say yes, I'm 19 years old.
And how will children react when they see what happened?
That was all like real? That all
it's
actually
totally real.
happened? I don't like it. Creepy. Pathetic. Freaky. Disgusting. Scary. Weird. Reality.
When our Dateline hidden camera investigation Dangerous Web continues. Dangerous Web continues.
We assembled a group of parents who live just a matter of miles from our hidden camera house. They all told me they were aware that computer predators are out there, but none was prepared to see what happened in their own backyard.
Personally, I'm totally shocked that that many people responded, which just shows me that it's not something rare. It's not the 1 in a million guy out there. They're all over.
They're all over, and yet there is nothing to make them stand out in a crowd. Everyday members of the community.
What frightens me more is that these guys are guys you might know in your life. That might be your neighbors, or you might socialize with these men and not know it.
Do you think that anything like this could happen to any of your children?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
They're out there.
I do, because they're very inventive.
So inventive that kids might not even sense there's danger.
It's scary because I think sometimes kids think that, it's all a game and they're just, playing along, and then they don't realize how all of a sudden it becomes somebody at your back.
I think it's very easy for children to give out information unwittingly.
But if seeing what these men did wasn't frightening enough for these parents, hearing what these middle school kids tell me they experience online may be more shocking.
Has anyone here had a stranger say anything you felt uncomfortable about, that was inappropriate? Has anyone ever tried to lure you into going to an inappropriate website?
Yeah, they give you the link and say, come here to view my naked pictures.
And like most kids, they don't always tell their parents.
How many of you, after having been approached or having a scary experience in a chat room, have gone to their parents right away to tell them what happened? Nobody? Why not?
Because we're scared of what they'll say. Like, if we'll get in trouble or yell at me or ground me from not going online ever again.
There is a disconnect between parents and children here.
There's a huge disconnect.
Terry Schroeder, founder and CEO of iSafe, a nonprofit foundation that educates children across the country on internet safety, says parents and kids need to work as a team.
I do not encourage any parent after hearing this interview to say, I'm getting that computer out of here, because you will severely handicap your child educationally, socially.
Instead, Schroeder says parents need to educate themselves about online dangers and create open communication where a child feels safe talking about inappropriate situations online.
Take the parenting skills that you use in real life and apply them in cyberspace. It's very simple. If something is going on, talk to your child about it. If your child comes to you, listen to them.
Yes.
In fact, Schroeder confirms what these kids told us. Most children are afraid to tell their parents about scary encounters online.
If they go tell their parents may not believe them, and then now they're going to get in trouble. And 9 times out of 10, what we tell the kids and what we tell the parents, it's usually not the kid's fault. They're innocent in this.
Kid is a victim of a crime.
Correct.
Basically.
A sex crime committed by predators who know exactly which of the kids' buttons to push.
It may be attention and affection. For another child, it may be gifts. For a lot of teenagers, it's romance. Just somebody who will give you this romance, pay attention to you, tell you how pretty you are, how nice you are, or whatever it is.
There's one guy right there coming right to the door.
These kids thought they were pretty hip to dangerous strangers online, but they weren't such know-it-alls. Once, with their parents' permission, I showed them the results of our investigation.
So this is just a game, do you? Yes, it's a just game.
That was all real? That all
it's
actually
totally real.
happened? I don't like it. Creepy. Pathetic. Freaky. Disgusting. Scary. Weird. Reality. Wrong.
Show your kids that you do care enough and that they will not be penalized if something happens. And also, be willing to learn from your kids. You may learn a lot from them as it pertains to technology.
Based upon the fact that we all have computers in our homes, do we then have the responsibility of almost being a spy or a cop to see what the kids are doing on the computer?
I've always done that.
But if parents think they can completely protect their kids by installing standard software or setting ground rules, think again.
We found ways to bend those rules and stuff like that.
So you know how to get around that stuff?
Yeah.
Have you ever done it yourself?
Yeah.
Even though your parents have said don't do that?
Rules are meant to be broken.
Meet 11-year-old Laomi Wright. She's become so good at getting around the rules, her mother is ready to throw out the computer.
Let's put it this way, she's not using the computer anymore.
When we come back, we'll bring in an internet safety expert to find out just what's going on at Laomi's house and whether anything can be done to help her mother and other frustrated parents protect their children online.
And next, how not to have this conversation with your child.
The name was like Dog Man or something
Dog
like
Man? Who was this guy?
I don't know.
You don't know?
When our Dateline hidden camera investigation, Dangerous Web, continues. We now continue with Dangerous Web on Dateline with Stone Phillips.
11-year-old Laomi Wright admits when it comes to the internet, she doesn't play by the rules.
Rules are meant to be broken.
So you can imagine what her mother, Michelle, a producer here at NBC, is going through. In fact, recently, she found her daughter chatting online with a stranger at 12:30 in the morning.
The name was like Dog Man or something.
Dog Man? Who was this guy?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Michelle has installed parental controls available through AOL and even downloaded software aimed at keeping the computer safe for Laomi. But still, her daughter has found a way around them.
You thought you were being a responsible parent.
Right.
And doing just about everything you could to make sure your daughter was safe on the internet.
Right. Plus, she gave me her word. She wouldn't talk to people that she didn't know, so.
In spite of all that, your daughter was still talking to a stranger via instant messaging.
Right. It's pretty scary, I can tell you that.
To help solve Michelle's problem, we enlisted the help of Detective Mike Sullivan, author of Safety Monitor, How to Protect Your Kids Online. The first thing he noticed, Michelle had the computer in the basement, an out-of-the-way place where a child can operate unsupervised.
Put it in a public room, right off the kitchen, dining room. Basically as you're going about your normal house chores, you're making dinner, you can look over and see the screen and check on what your child's doing.
Next, Detective Sullivan suggested setting up layers of defense, starting with internet service providers like MSN, Earthlink, or AOL, which all provide some type of parental control. Michelle has AOL, and although she had set up the controls, she wasn't using them correctly. AOL has recently updated its protective controls, making it tougher for kids to outsmart.
Everything is going to function through AOL, and then they're going to monitor what she's doing from there.
Next, our expert downloads WatchRight software that will allow Michelle to read all of Laomi's instant messages and chat room conversations.
So you can keep an eye on what she's doing. Even if she changes her password on you, this program's still going to read it and let you see what she's been doing online.
If reading all her daughter's online messages seems too intrusive or time-consuming, the detective has another suggestion: filtering software that stops Laomi from sending out personal information, like her home address or phone number. The software would also detect a predator trying to make contact with Laomi, and then automatically send Michelle an email to warn her.
So if your daughter's at home and something goes wrong, the software, Cyber Sentinel, is going to send you a message at work saying, you might want to call home, and it will actually tell you who the user online was, what was the inappropriate statement. So if she said some naughty words, or someone said something of a predatory nature to her, you're actually going to see it in the mail.
And our expert has one more suggestion for Michelle: software that will record Laomi's every move on the computer without her daughter knowing it.
So the program is like a VCR, showing you, hey, wait a second, this is what my child's doing online.
That's great, look at that.
This program is actually going to come in and say, wait a second, they tried to sneak a program by you, but you can still check them out.
Our expert says each program is very user-friendly and costs about $40. And it's clear both Michelle and the detective think it's worth it.
There's no silver bullet that's going to take care of everything. What you can get to is a state of peace of mind as a parent, that I've done everything I can do to protect my child while they're on the computer in my house.
I guess all the protective software in the world will not substitute for a good relationship between a parent and a child.
No, an active, involved parent is more than any match for any predator that's out there right now.
Now that our expert has installed and set up tough protective measures, Michelle is ready to let Laomi back on the computer.
Have you learned your lesson?
Yes.
To help make sure your kids learn their lesson, you can get some advice from Detective Mike Sullivan by sending him an email. To find out how, and for more tips on keeping your kids safe online, visit our website. The address is dateline.msnbc.com. That's all for this edition of Dateline Friday. We'll see you again for Dateline Sunday at 7, 6 Central. I'm Stone Phillips, and for all of us at NBC News, good night.
Putting together this video was the first time I'd watched old Dangerous Web since it aired back in late September 2004. Definitely forgot how long that introduction was prior to getting to the footage of the guys showing up. Watching it really jogged the memory of the hypocrisy of Dateline. In the intro, they highlighted that tragic story about the 24-year-old psychotic online groomer strangling the 12-year-old he had met online. Yet, after this thing was over, a comment by Lynn Keller showed she really didn't get it. Yeah, remember that screenshot if you end up watching the Riverside Supplemental video and wonder why I'm being such a dickhead about almost everything. Then again, the second Dateline Supplemental will have even more examples that will form up the fairly antagonistic relationship I end up having with the Dateline producers. Needless to say, this screenshot made me angry. And later, I was even more annoyed when I saw them highlight the case of the 24-year-old. Guess the murderer would just have been a stupid kid had he shown up for the Bethpage sting, too. There were some challenges during this sting that made our results even more impressive. First up, obviously, was that it was a Monday to Wednesday sting operation rather than a Friday to Sunday, as would become far more the norm later on. This meant we had limited hours, as the house was open from basically noon to 8 p.m. each day, giving us fewer slots for working adults. Due to that, a bunch of those who showed up ended up being between the ages of 18 and 25. A lot of college students especially. As you can see on the original calendar on screen, we ended up with 16 over mostly 2 days, but we had 14 more scheduled. The show rate of 57% was very, very low for us, which I chalk up both the weird days we did the sting, as well as the weather, which was cold and snowy. You'll notice that on the Wednesday, there wasn't much scheduled. That was due to the focus on Ryan Hogan, the firefighter. At the end of March 9th, Frag posted for us to wind down, as Dateline felt they had more than enough confrontation footage for an hour-long special. Had we not stopped chatting on the 9th with new guys, we definitely would have packed out that third day, too. This was a problem with the media-only stings, as opposed to the later sting operations we did with both law enforcement and the media. It gave the media way too much control over our scheduling. You'll see a greater example of that when I cover the Fairfax, Virginia Dateline sting. The story of the house was likewise somewhat insane. So the house owners were paid $5,000 for the use of their house over the 3 days. A pretty nice tidy sum, especially back in 2004. However, the really crazy thing is that the family that lived there was coming back on the night of the 10th. Due to that, our people had to go and turn around anyone that we had been talking to, making sure all of them knew not to come over that night. I would have given it another night of not being in that house were I that family. That's just pretty wild. The whole house situation was pretty wacky, as it was right next to a real estate business office, and there was limited parking on the street in general. A lot of the guys showing up would just park in the real estate business office parking lot. The real kicker was that the name of the real estate office was Vigilant Real Estate. Yeah, you can't make that shit up. Day 1 of the sting was covered in great detail at the time by Frag in this write-up, giving a lot of backstory to how the sting went down. The whole Dark Hero 73 confrontation was far more dramatic than shown, especially him stalking around the kitchen. We were in a conference with Frag and Dell during this sting, and the information relayed to us during Dark Hero 73's confrontation had us all quite a bit concerned. Being that only half of the runtime of Dangerous Web was actually about the guys showing up, instead focusing on things parents can do and what do kids think, far more than future episodes would, it gave scant time to each individual guy. That's why a predator like 34 going on 17, only referenced in the show as Craig, didn't have nearly as much shown as the details Frag writes down in that screenshot. Had this been a 2-hour episode like most future editions of To Catch a Predator would be, people would have had a far better appreciation for how much work Dell put in on this sting. It was a lot more work than just yelling through a door for many of those arriving. The editing also made certain guys seem like they showed up at different times than they did. Steve, the first guy focused on at the house with his dumb bandana, actually showed up on the second day. Me for Magic and Y also showed up the second day. Ed in NYC, that little prick, same deal, second day. Only 2 of the guys that showed up on the first day got any real screen time at all. The second day write-up was done by Dell, and goes more in chronological order of those that arrived, far more detailed on the actual work he was doing, and effort taken to get guys into the house. The extra details about Ed and NYC are a good example of just how little time they had for each guy, as the entire back and forth with Ed seems to play out in seconds rather than a far longer time after editing. The other striking element from this was just how they featured next to nothing of Oral Guy LI in the show. I honestly don't know why, because this guy had claimed in the chats that he had a prior 17-year-old victim, and he was much older than the rest of the guys that Dateline had left on the cutting room floor. As a piece of trivia for anyone who read many of our chat logs and ever wondered why we almost always said, that direct photo share doesn't work. This stems from the work we did on this sting operation. We had a guide during this sting that used the direct photo share feature on Yahoo to ping the IP of a couple of our chatters, finding out that they were not actually in New York. Originally, we were told that the story would air in April or May of 2004. Instead, they wanted more time to put together segments for it, and for the Ryan Hogan stuff to play out a bit more. It ended up getting pushed back, way back, to September 2004, over 6 months from when we did the sting itself. This made our follow-up focus on these guys far shittier than it would have been otherwise. We started posting chat logs on the 11th of March 2004, which was right in the middle of the Newtown Square sting imbroglio, as well as the wrestling promoter Rob Feinstein follow-up efforts. This took a ton of focus of volunteers, so our spate of posting New York Predators went kind of under-focused on due to everyone having their eyes on Philadelphia. In fact, most of our forum members had no idea we had just done a national news group media bust, as we basically just acted like it was a regular old local TV group media bust. Then, when the story aired in September of 2004, we were in the middle of going to war over the comments of a detective that shit all over a 14-year-old that I, Frag, and Dell had worked on recovering. so people didn't spend a lot of time when the show aired to go back and do follow-up on those posted 6 months prior. Looking back now, I wish I had thrown more focus on going back and doing proper follow-up on all those guys from Dateline 1. They really benefited from the Philadelphia sting issues than the other things we had going on 6 months later when the piece actually aired. The show aired on a Friday night and won the night, shockingly enough. 8.4 million Americans watched the episode, a tremendous number. Screw you, Joan of Arcadia. What the hell was Joan of Arcadia anyways? I have no recollection of that show. The numbers blew away what was expected, and Dateline was very happy with how many people watched. So were we, not only because it gave us a lot of readers and new volunteers, but because it was definitely the first major national news story to educate parents on the dangers of Yahoo and AOL chat rooms and instant messenger. The episode was also nominated for a National News Emmy. I have no idea if it won or not. Kind of amusing in retrospect, though, given all the pseudo-intellectual hand-wringing about whether it was the proper journalism or not that would follow in the decades to come. Well, the stupid news Emmys thought it was, so eat shit, really. Not that it matters to me. The concept of journalistic ethics is as ethereal as a concept gets. Because you don't actually exist. Media ethics don't really exist. Dooby-doo, yeah. Okay, well, now you understand why I have AI do the singing in these. To finish out my look at the first Dateline sting, some quick touches on most of the guys that showed up and were on Dateline, and the guys that showed up and were not on Dateline. Going to try to blow through these pretty fast, other than Ryan Hogan, the NYC firefighter. SR82194 was the first guy shown at the house with his annoying-ass bandana. He sent in one of the most god-awful rights of reply ever. The entire thread about his right of reply on our forums were people absolutely losing it over how bad it was. I don't even know if I can type that poorly on purpose. This was a guy we got everything on in follow-up. We talked to the wife who tried denial. It was a full-on reckoning for old Steve, and that's around 6 months before Dateline aired. Second guy shown was Me for Magic NY. He was deported in early 2005, an early example of dude incapable of following simple driving directions. By all accounts, a very stupid person. Good riddance. Third confrontation shown was Dark Hero 73. Confrontation took so long that 2 others arrived and were not identified during it. As Frag wrote in his Day 1 write-up earlier in the video, this was a much longer confrontation than what was shown on Dateline, with Dark Hero 73 stalking around the kitchen, the belief of Frag and Dell that he was looking for a kitchen knife. We contacted his roommate, but other than that, he was a hard person to track down due to his stays in mental hospitals. One of my personal most hated guys to ever show up at any of these things, Ed in NYC, is next up. Super arrogant. Tries his, "Oh, you're 19" bullshit. Stated that he was 25 to the decoy, ended up being 36. Found his real name off a reverse cell phone lookup. Volunteers got his wife on the phone, and she tried to deny knowing who he was. Both Frag and Dell were super sketched out by this guy, far more so than Dateline really showed. Personally, found him to be the most loathsome of the bunch. Just a real asshole. Fifth guy shown was only identified as Craig, but his AOL name was 34 going on 17. He got a lot of phone calls, and we figured out his identity, but he wiped out his online profiles pretty quickly, and that was that for follow-up. Ska 80 Pi is next. He gets told to get his ass into the basement, which scares the fuck out of him, as evidenced by his right of reply and the screenshots told by Dell about the situation. MUXACB 2003 had another awful right of reply, especially considering he admitted intent on camera while talking to Chris Hansen. We chalked this one up to him being afraid of being arrested, so he wanted to try to put it out there that he wasn't interested in actually having sex with a minor, despite him saying it on camera. This thing had quite a few really bad right of replies. And the last guy that Dateline focused on was Ryan4686, aka Ryan Hogan. This was an interesting one, as anti-perverted justice websites tried to contact Hogan and his shitty family to aid them. His mother was another one of those that went on and on with delusions about her precious baby boy. Getting him to the house was more than a challenge, as he saw a cop car on his first pass and got into an accident on his second attempt. His getting on webcam after his recantation phone call really fucked him, as there was a debate prior to his masturbation session over whether he recanted due to seeing the cop car or due to having an actual change of heart. The arrest of Ryan Hogan was a huge arrest for us, as the Department of Justice literally thanked us in the press release. This drove the people who hated us mad, and wasn't something the Department of Justice prosecutor had to do in her press release. It was a very kind and appreciated little statement that did us a world of good, especially since the idiotic Hogans were bleeding on about trying to sue us at the time. Hogan was our 14th ever conviction overall, and our first federal conviction. This conviction was beloved by us for multiple reasons, from shutting up his mouthy, stupid mother, to being one that really allowed us to point to the statement by the Department of Justice when we were trying to get police to make arrests of guys we would contact them about. It is somewhat odd that the only guy shown on the episode not to arrive at the house was the one we got convicted. But that's what he got for disgracing the New York Fire Department on national TV, I guess. Optics matter quite a bit in this world, unfortunately. Beyond that, there were a good number of guys not shown on the show, chiefly because of what I noted earlier, the absolute bleeding heart hypocritical delusion that most were stupid kids, despite almost all of them being older than Dell, and most of them being older than me at the time. A 24-year-old trying to have sex with a 13-year-old is not the activity of a stupid kid. It's the activity of a sexual predator. Am I still bitter about that sentiment 20 years later? Why, no, of course not. Oh, yes, I absolutely am. Never mind. I'm belaboring this point for a very simple reason. It's more effective in illustrating the problem to parents that have a mix of guys that are scary visually and a mix of guys that aren't as scary visually, while pointing out that both scary guy and hey, not a scary guy had the exact same chat with what they thought was a very underage kid. One issue the show had in editing later on, especially, was over-focusing on the super freaks, the super freaky guys that would show up and not really focus then on the more normal-looking sexual predators. It gave rise to the idiotic, well, a kid is safe online because they wouldn't want to meet a guy like that anyways criticism, since Dateline tended to over-focus on the abnormal-looking fellows as opposed to all the normal-looking guys we would send as well. Let's run through quickly those that showed up but didn't make air. Jovial Jace was the first guy to show up at 1 p.m. on the Monday. Found his real name, address, and cell phone. He was contacted quite a bit. Kept up a lame excuse that he was writing a story about kids online and wanted to talk to the parents of the decoy. The worst part of his chat, a long segment talking about how much he wants to give the 13-year-old oral. WA55 Up, or Was Up, of course, was the second guy to show to the sting. Very disgusting chat, big time into anal. Most of his family was contacted after being posted. The worst part of his chat, A long stretch where he tries to convince the 13-year-old decoy to have sex with him without using a condom, whining for multiple lines about how they make him go soft and that it's better without. Or the part where he tries to convince her to do anal because it hurts less than losing your virginity. Yet wasn't shown because Dateline didn't want to humiliate a stupid kid. Cool. Metro Guy 28 showed up midway through the first day. Horrible picture. Red reply was better than some of the awfulness we received from this sting, but that's not saying much. Worked for an armored car company who fired him pretty quickly. Worst part of his chat? Well, beyond the picture he sent of himself hairy and shirtless, he tried to guilt trip what he thought was a 14-year-old to be his girlfriend and went on and on and on about wanting to be the first to lick her. Ron71EN here showed up near the end of the night of the first day. Not a lot to mention here. Blew up his home phone, but not a ton of follow-up otherwise. He was 27. Still not shown, really. Worst part of his chat? Well, it was an extremely short chat, but he goes on about wanting to give her oral until she orgasms. XX What the Deal XX was the last guy to show up on the first day. He was 18 and showed up for a 12-year-old. Not a lot of follow-up. Worst part of the chat? Well, wasn't a ton to the chat, really. Pretty vague overall. Still, when confronted by Hansen, he was asked if he had the condoms on him to use on the girl in his sweatshirt as he claimed to have on the phone. Hansen told him to take them out and put them on the table, which this guy immediately did. Definitely one of the youngest guys we ever had show up to a sting house, and even my cold black heart can see why they didn't air this particular confrontation. Illegal Lava showed up around 2 p.m. on the second day. This sting was very plentiful in the bad rights of reply. He shared the phone with his dad, who was none too pleased about the situation when he got phone calls. Worst part of his chat? Well, there was next to nothing of sexual intent in this dude's chat. It was an extremely short chat overall. I mean, he's still a piece of shit, but I wouldn't have showed him either. Only Me 2004 arrived around 3 p.m. on the second day. He walked 3 miles to the house from a train station in the snow. Then he had to walk back 3 miles to the train station in the snow. I bet that was a fun walk. Little to no useful follow-up on this guy, unfortunately. Didn't make the show because, again, young, despite the details of his long walk in the snow. Worst part of the chat? Tries to convince the decoy to get another underage female friend to come over so he can have a threesome with 2 underage females. Overall, an extremely explicit chat. Blazed 420-024. And if you don't get his wittiness, 024 is 420 backwards. He arrived around 5 p.m. on the second day. He drove around 90 miles. He brought alcohol and condoms. Plenty of follow-up contact at his home, but no real details on how effective that was. Worst part of his chat? Chat turns sexual within 8 minutes and stays sexual through quite a long and involved chat, especially for our work at the time. He got very aggressive near the end of the chat as well. Oral Guy LI was the last one to show up on the second day. This guy was really bonkers not to be shown, given that he was in his 30s and claimed to have a 17-year-old neighbor that he had had sex with. Again, not a ton of follow-up due to most of our hardcore follow-up people focusing on Newtown Square sting individuals. Worst part of the chat? Him trying to offer up his 17-year-old neighbor to our 14-year-old decoy, and bragging about sexual acts performed on the 17-year-old. Why this guy wasn't featured, I haven't the fucking foggiest. Of all the ones that showed and weren't on the actual show, this guy definitely should have been featured. There were 14 more individuals scheduled, some of whom actually did show up, but came at times when others were already in the house. We posted 6 of them on the main page, because people didn't know what was going on with the Dateline show. Some of these that we posted ended up having a lot more follow-up done than quite a few of the individuals that did show. That was my nostalgia overdose, looking at all the elements surrounding the first Dateline NBC sting from the perspective of both myself and the organization in general. Hopefully there were little details and stories that were interesting or at least new for anyone that listened to it. For me, it was quite a walk down memory lane, as many of these details and much of the episode itself had long since flittered away from my memory banks. Definitely did not recall how annoyed I already was with Dateline producers by the time the show aired, and that annoyance would continue to escalate with the second Dateline sting in Virginia a year and a half later. On my sixth supplemental, it's time for me to return home, taking a look at the various KPTV Portland, Oregon stings we did in 2004 and 2005. It will be a far shorter video in terms of my voiceovers, given that, well, we'll get into the why of that in the next video. But hey, at least they will feature my favorite of the local news reporters who did stings with us. Until then, I'm Xavier Von Erck. Thanks for watching.
I don't know how lies start. Never understood why people aren't smart. How fast the truth and reality fall apart when stories are told by an idiot with a bleeding heart. I had 99.1 issues, but acquittals weren't one. In court, winning wasn't a real fucking problem. If you had cases fall apart, I feel bad for you, son. My excellent people almost never had that outcome. In the courts, 622 versus 5. Yet people still say our shit was impossible to prosecute. Lies so stupid, can't conceive how they thrive. So let's cover that lying shit at its very root. If your favorite sports team won 99.1% of its games, if you went bowling, filled 99.1% of your frames, if your arguments proved 99.1% of your claims, if your partner had 99.1% of your encounters end in canes, would you have fuckers talking shit about your ability? Would anyone ever question your utility? Would people ever react with hostility, or would people praise most definitively? I had 99.1 issues, but acquittals weren't one. In court, winning wasn't a real fucking problem. If you had cases fall apart, I feel bad for you, son. My excellent people almost never had that outcome. Let's talk about those 5 real quick. One dude didn't enter a house and the jury was soft. 2 clean-cut military guys running that valor stick. 2 in Florida dropped because the judge was a mental dwarf. 5 total, can't deny that those results suck dick. Now let's talk about 622. How am I going to do this in verse? Too many convictions and endless lyrical cue. All across the country, predators incredibly diverse. Let me lay it out pretty goddamn simply. 99.1% conviction rate. Most of those cases wrapped up very quickly. Yet 20 years later, we still getting hate. I had 99.1 issues, but acquittals weren't one. In court, winning wasn't a real fucking problem. If you had cases fall apart, I feel bad for you, son. My excellent people almost never had that outcome. Rocky only won 60% of his fictional fights. People only 90% survive lightning strikes. Climbers only 67% reach Everest's heights. Predators only 6% brought a case of mics. Jordan only made 49% of his shots. Henderson only stole 80% of his bases. Ladies on Instagram only 30% of thoughts. Feds win around 97% of the cases. 99.1% success for us. Numbers so high, hard to compute. So how in the world was our shit impossible to prosecute? Stick that nonsense right back up your ass, shoot. In any other situation, that number is success absolute.